Have you ever felt like you prayed with all your heart, and still nothing changed? Like you cried silently when nobody could see you and still heaven seemed quiet? Like you kept believing even when everything around you suggested you should stop hoping? Because if that is you right now, then you need to hear this carefully, because what you prayed for did not disappear. It was not ignored. It was not delayed without purpose. And it is closer to you than you think, closer than your fear, closer than your doubt, closer than the voices that keep telling you it is too late. Because sometimes the blessing you are waiting for is not far away at all. It is already moving towards you step by step while you are still wondering if God even heard you. And what feels like silence is actually preparation. What feels like waiting is actually positioning. What feels like loss is actually protection. And what feels like delay is actually divine timing working behind the scenes in ways your eyes cannot yet see, but your spirit can feel if you stay still long enough to listen, because there is a reason you did not give up completely even after everything you faced, and there is a reason this message found you right now at this exact moment, when your strength felt almost finished, and your patience felt almost empty, and your hope felt almost fragile, because this is the moment when things begin to shift quietly before they shift visibly, and this is the moment when the blessing you thought was far away begins to move closer than ever before. And sometimes the hardest part of faith is not believing that miracles exist, but believing that they are meant for you personally, because after disappointment, after rejection, after delays, after unanswered prayers, it becomes easy to believe that maybe your story will stay the same forever, but that thought is not the truth, and it never was the truth, because there are blessings already assigned to your life that cannot be cancelled by fear, cannot be blocked by people, cannot be erased by mistakes, cannot be delayed beyond their appointed time, and cannot miss you because they were created with your name already written on them before you even asked for them. And what you call waiting is often the space where God prepares both the blessing and the person who will receive it, because sometimes if the blessing arrived earlier it would have confused you instead of helping you. Sometimes if the door opened earlier, you would have walked into the wrong version of your future. Sometimes if the opportunity appeared earlier you would not have recognized it as the answer to your prayer. And that is why timing is never punishment, timing is protection. And the truth is, many people quit one moment before their breakthrough simply because nothing changed fast enough to satisfy their expectations, but what they could not see was that everything had already begun changing in ways too quiet for their eyes to notice. And that might be exactly where you are, standing right now, in a place that feels ordinary, in a season that feels slow, in a chapter that feels uncertain, while something extraordinary is already forming around you, step by step, decision by decision, moment by moment. And sometimes the biggest mistake we make during waiting seasons is assuming that nothing is happening, when in reality everything is happening, just not in a way that looks dramatic yet, because the strongest transformations almost always begin invisibly before they become undeniable, and the blessing you prayed for did not start moving the day you noticed progress. It started moving the day you prayed with tears, the day you whispered hope, the day you chose faith instead of fear, the day you decided not to quit even though quitting would have been easier. And there are moments when heaven answers quietly first before it answers loudly, because quiet answers prepare your heart, while loud answers change your circumstances. And right now your heart is being strengthened for something bigger than what you originally imagined, because sometimes the blessing you prayed for arrives differently than expected, but better than imagined, and stronger than requested, and more perfectly timed than you could ever plan for yourself. And if you look back carefully, you will notice that even in the middle of your hardest days, there were small signs that you were not alone, small moments that felt too perfectly placed to be coincidence, small opportunities that appeared exactly when you needed them, small encouragements that arrived exactly when you almost gave up, and those were not accidents, those were reminders that your story is still moving forward even when your emotions try to convince you that everything has stopped, because progress is not always loud, progress is not always visible, progress is not always immediate, but progress is always happening when faith continues walking even after clarity disappears, and what you call uncertainty is often the place where faith becomes strongest. Because faith is not proven when everything makes sense, faith becomes powerful when nothing makes sense, but you continue trusting anyway, and right now, whether you realize it or not, you are standing closer to the answer than you were yesterday, closer to the breakthrough than you were last month, closer to the blessing than you were last year. And sometimes the only difference between the past season and the next season is one decision to keep believing, one decision to keep moving forward, one decision to keep trusting that what you prayed for is still on its way, even if the road looks longer than expected, because what is meant for you does not disappear just because the journey takes time. And what is meant for you does not lose your address just because you felt lost for a while, and what is meant for you does not forget your name just because your patience was tested longer than you wanted, because destiny does not operate on human deadlines, it operates on perfect alignment, and alignment is happening right now in ways you cannot yet measure, but soon you will recognize them clearly. And when that moment arrives, you will understand why the waiting lasted longer than expected, and why the silence stayed longer than comfortable, and why the path looked different than planned, because everything you experienced was positioning you exactly where you needed to stand so the blessing could find you at the right time in the right condition, with the right strength to receive it. Without fear and without confusion, and without hesitation, because sometimes the greatest proof that your blessing is close is not that everything becomes easy, but that something inside you becomes stronger even before anything outside you changes, and that strength is not random, that strength is preparation for what is about to enter your life sooner than you think. And right now there is something happening behind the scenes that you cannot see yet, but your spirit has already started to feel it, because the same God who heard your quiet prayers when nobody else noticed your tears is already arranging moments, connections, opportunities, protection, and unexpected shifts that are slowly moving into position around your life, even though nothing looks different on the outside yet. And that is exactly how divine timing works, because God rarely announces His biggest blessings before they arrive. He prepares them silently, He positions them carefully, and then suddenly everything changes in a way that makes you realize why the waiting season had to last longer than you wanted it to, because the truth is you were never being ignored, you were being prepared, and the blessing you thought was delayed was actually being protected from arriving too early, before your heart, before your strength, before your wisdom, and before your faith were ready to carry it without losing it again. And that is why this moment right now matters more than you realize, because heaven never wastes a season of your life, even the painful ones, even the confusing ones, even the nights when you asked God why things were falling apart instead of coming together. Those moments were shaping something inside you that your future blessing is going to need in order to stay in your life permanently, and not temporarily. And there are people watching this right now who almost gave up believing that their prayer would ever be answered, but something inside them kept telling them to hold on just a little longer, to trust just a little deeper, and to keep moving forward even when nothing made sense, because when God places a promise inside your heart, He also places a quiet strength inside your spirit that refuses to let you quit completely even when everything around you feels uncertain, and what you are experiencing right now is not coincidence, it is confirmation that the breakthrough you have been waiting for is already closer than it looks and closer than it feels, because sometimes God allows the pressure to increase right before the blessing arrives, so that when it finally reaches you there is no doubt in your mind that it was Him who opened the door that nobody else could open, and the reason you are still here, the reason you are still trying, the reason your faith has not disappeared even after everything you have faced is because heaven has already decided that your story is not ending in disappointment but in restoration, and the same God who carried you through the seasons that almost broke you is now leading you into a season that will rebuild you stronger than before. And there is something powerful about realizing that the struggle you thought was working against you was actually working for you. The silence you thought meant rejection was actually protection, and the delay you thought meant denial was actually preparation for something larger than what you originally asked for, because when God answers a prayer, He does not just give you what you requested, He often gives you something better, something stronger, something more stable, something that lasts longer than what you imagined when you first started praying. And that is why you must not stop believing now, because blessings often arrive quietly at first. Sometimes they show up as unexpected peace, sometimes they appear as a sudden opportunity, sometimes they come through a conversation you were not planning to have, or a door you did not even know existed. But when you stay faithful long enough, you begin to notice that things are slowly shifting in your favor in ways that only God could arrange, and the people who once doubted your journey will eventually witness the evidence of what faith can do when it refuses to give up too early, because your story is not just about surviving the hard seasons anymore, it is about stepping into the answer that has been moving toward you this entire time, even when you could not see it yet. And even now, as you are listening to this message, something inside your spirit is starting to recognize that what you prayed for is no longer far away, it is already on its way toward you and closer than you ever imagined. There is something powerful happening in your life right now that you may not fully understand yet, because sometimes when God is preparing a breakthrough, He allows a season where nothing seems to make sense, where doors close without explanation, where people become distant without warning, where opportunities disappear just when you thought they were finally opening. And in those quiet, confusing moments, it can feel like your prayers are floating unanswered somewhere far away. But the truth is, your prayers are not lost. They are being arranged into a miracle that is moving towards you step by step, even when you cannot see it yet. Because God never ignores a heart that continues to believe through silence, and never abandons someone who keeps trusting even when the path becomes unclear. And what you are walking through right now is not a delay meant to discourage you, but a preparation designed to strengthen you, so that when the blessing arrives you will recognize it, protect it, and walk into it with confidence instead of fear. Because sometimes the greatest blessings require the strongest version of you to receive them. You may have wondered why certain plans did not work out the way you expected, why certain relationships changed, why certain dreams seemed to slow down instead of speed up. And it is easy in those moments to think something has gone wrong. But often what feels like a setback is actually protection that you cannot yet see. Because God can see the road ahead long before you arrive there, and He knows which directions would have hurt you even if they looked perfect at the time. So when He closes a door, it is not rejection, it is redirection towards something stronger, safer, and more aligned with the purpose He placed inside your life long before anyone else ever noticed your potential. There are nights when your heart has carried questions that no one else could hear, moments when you stayed strong on the outside but quietly asked God if things would ever change, if the waiting would ever end, if the struggle would finally turn into something meaningful. And those prayers were not weak moments. They were sacred conversations that God listened to with deep attention, because faith is not pretending everything is easy. Faith is continuing to believe even when the path feels heavy and uncertain, and every time you chose to keep going instead of giving up, you moved one step closer to the blessing that is already moving toward you right now. Sometimes the reason your breakthrough feels close is because God has been preparing it behind the scenes in ways you cannot measure, arranging connections you have not met yet, opening doors you have not seen yet, shifting situations you cannot control yet, and while you are focusing on surviving the present moment, He is already shaping the future that will surprise you with peace you did not expect and opportunities you did not imagine. Because when God begins to move things into place, He does it with precision and timing that no human plan could ever match. And that is why what is coming into your life will feel different from anything you forced before. Because this time it will arrive with clarity instead of confusion, and with peace instead of pressure. There is also a reason you have felt a quiet strength growing inside you recently, even though your circumstances may not have fully changed yet. Because before a blessing becomes visible, it often becomes spiritual first. It begins as courage you did not have before, patience you did not think you could carry, hope that keeps returning even after disappointment tried to silence it. And those inner changes are signs that something is already shifting in your life right now, whether you realize it or not. Because transformation always starts inside before it shows itself outside, and the strength you are feeling today is preparing you to walk confidently into what tomorrow is bringing. You are not standing in the same place you were months ago, even if it sometimes feels that way, because growth does not always make loud announcements. Sometimes it happens quietly in your thoughts, in your decisions, in the way you no longer react the same way to situations that once overwhelmed you, in the way you continue moving forward even when the path is uncertain. And those quiet changes are evidence that God has been working in your life the entire time, shaping your mindset, strengthening your faith, and preparing your heart for the blessing that is closer than you think right now. There will be a moment very soon when you look back at this season and realize that what felt like waiting was actually positioning, what felt like silence was actually preparation, what felt like uncertainty was actually protection. And in that moment, everything that once confused you will begin to make sense in a way that fills your heart with gratitude instead of frustration. Because God never wastes your patience, and He never ignores your persistence, and the blessing that is coming into your life will carry proof that every step you took in faith was leading somewhere meaningful all along, even when the road looked empty at the time. Folded hands sparkles. And right now, even if your situation still feels unfinished, even if your answers still feel delayed, even if your breakthrough still feels invisible, you are standing closer to your blessing than you have ever been before. Because the moment just before change arrives often feels the quietest, and the moment just before doors open often feels the most uncertain. But that silence is not emptiness, it is movement you cannot yet see. And God is already working behind the scenes in ways that will soon become impossible for you to ignore. Listen carefully, because what you are experiencing right now is not confusion without purpose, and it is not delay without direction, but it is the quiet moment before a powerful shift that God has already prepared for you long before you even realized you would need it. And the reason your heart has been feeling restless lately is because something in your spirit already knows that the season you were surviving in is ending and the season you were praying for is beginning to open in front of you. Even if your physical eyes cannot see the full picture yet, because sometimes God does His deepest work in silence when nothing seems to be changing on the outside, but everything is being rearranged on the inside, and the people who misunderstood your journey, the ones who doubted your strength, the ones who walked away when you needed support the most, were never part of the promise, they were only part of the preparation. And what felt like rejection was actually protection, and what felt like loneliness was actually positioning, and what felt like loss was actually God making space for something greater that could not enter your life until certain doors quietly closed behind you. And right now God is asking you not to judge your situation by what you see, but to trust what He is building, because there are blessings already moving toward you, conversations already being arranged, opportunities already being aligned, and answers already on their way that will suddenly make everything you went through start making sense. And one day very soon you will look back at this exact moment that once felt heavy and uncertain, and you will realize it was the turning point where your story quietly changed direction in your favor. And even though your patience has been tested and your faith has been stretched more than you expected, God has not forgotten a single prayer you whispered in private, and He has not ignored a single tear you tried to hide from everyone else, because heaven pays attention to what the world overlooks, and the strength you showed when nobody clapped for you, the courage you carried when nobody understood you, and the faith you held onto when nothing around you made sense are the very reasons the next chapter of your life will not look ordinary but extraordinary in ways that only God could arrange. So do not give up now, do not lose hope now, and do not stop believing now, because the breakthrough you have been waiting for is not far away, it is closer than it has ever been. And the moment you keep choosing faith instead of fear, you step one move closer to the life God has already planned for you, and the miracle you thought was delayed is actually being delivered at the exact right time for your destiny. And what is coming next will not only change your situation, but it will restore your confidence, renew your strength, and remind you that God was working for you even when everything around you looked still. There is something powerful happening in your life right now that you cannot fully see yet, but you can feel it in the quiet moments when your heart becomes heavy without reason, and in the unexpected peace that suddenly replaces fear, because God is not just preparing a blessing for you, He is preparing you for the blessing. And the reason the season has felt confusing, slow, and sometimes even painful is because the version of you that is about to step into this next chapter cannot carry the same doubts, the same attachments, or the same fears that once held you back, which is why doors closed unexpectedly, which is why certain people drifted away without explanation, which is why plans you thought were certain suddenly changed direction, because God was protecting your future even when it felt like He was interrupting your present. And what you must understand today is that nothing you experienced was wasted, not a single tear, not a single delay, not a single night when you questioned whether Your prayers were being heard because heaven was working in silence, shaping situations, aligning timing, and removing obstacles you never even knew existed. And right now, as you are listening to this message, something inside you is beginning to recognize that the pressure you felt recently was not meant to break you, it was meant to position you, because before every major breakthrough there is always a moment when things feel uncertain and unstable, as if life is shifting beneath your feet, but that shift is not loss, it is movement, it is transition, it is preparation for elevation, and God is asking you in this moment to trust Him, not because everything makes sense yet, but because everything is finally coming together in ways that only He can arrange. And even though you may not see the full picture today, you are closer than you think, closer to clarity, closer to restoration, closer to answers, closer to the opportunity you prayed for, and closer to the peace you thought might never return again. And the reason this message found you today is not coincidence but confirmation that heaven has not forgotten your name, your prayers are not lost, your waiting has purpose, and the breakthrough you have been hoping for is already moving toward you, even now, quietly, powerfully, and at exactly the right time. Begins at the moment when everything looks quiet on the outside, but heaven is actually moving the fastest behind the scenes. And this is the stage where many people mistakenly think nothing is happening, yet this is the exact season where God is rearranging conversations you cannot hear, opening doors you cannot see, and removing obstacles you never even knew were standing in your path. Because sometimes the greatest evidence that your blessing is close is not noise but silence, not speed but preparation, not visibility but protection. And if you have been feeling a strange mix of patience and pressure at the same time, then this message is especially for you, because God is not delaying your future. He is designing it carefully so that when it finally arrives, it will not break you, confuse you, or disappear quickly, but instead remain strong and stable in your life longer than you imagined. Folded hands. There are moments in life when you start questioning whether your prayers were heard at all. When you begin replaying your past decisions and wondering if something you did earlier blocked what you asked God for. But what you must understand right now is that God does not forget sincere prayers, and He does not abandon faithful hearts. Instead, He often waits for the exact right alignment of people, timing, and opportunities so that what He gives you will not only arrive but will also stay. Because temporary blessings create temporary joy, but prepared blessings create lasting transformation. And the season you are in right now is not empty, even if it feels slow. It is full of invisible preparation that will soon become visible evidence. Sparkles. God is also strengthening parts of you that your blessing will require later. Because the person you were last year could not carry the responsibility that is coming into your life soon. And the person you were a few months ago may not have had the confidence or clarity to recognize the opportunity standing in front of you today. So, instead of rushing the process, God has been quietly shaping your mindset, your patience, your courage, and your spiritual awareness so that when the moment arrives you will not hesitate, you will not doubt, and you will not walk away from what you once prayed for in fear. You will step forward with certainty because you will finally be ready to receive what is already being prepared for you right now. Dizzy. Something else important is happening in this season that many people overlook, and that is the silent removal of distractions that once slowed your progress. Because not every closed door in your life was a loss. Some of them were protection, some of them were redirection, and some of them were necessary endings that made space for something far greater than what you originally expected. And although those changes may have confused you at the time, you are beginning to see now that your path is becoming clearer, lighter, and more focused than before, which is often the strongest sign that God is guiding you closer to the answer you have been waiting for. Raising hands, you may also notice that your intuition feels stronger recently, that your patience feels deeper than before, and that certain things that once bothered you no longer control your emotions the same way they used to. And this is not random growth but intentional preparation, because when God moves someone toward a breakthrough, He first stabilizes their spirit so they can walk into the blessing without fear, without comparison, and without hesitation. And the calm strength you are developing right now is proof that you are closer to the turning point than you realize. Sunrise, there is also someone watching this message right now who almost gave up expecting anything to change. Someone who quietly told themselves that maybe their moment had already passed, or maybe their prayer was meant for someone else instead. But what you need to hear clearly today is that your timing is still alive. Your opportunity is still moving toward you, and your story is still unfolding in ways that will surprise you soon, because God does not bring you this far just to leave your journey unfinished. He brings you this far so that when your breakthrough finally appears, you will recognize that every delay had a purpose and every step had direction, even when you could not see it at the time. Glowing star, and as you continue moving through this season, remember that faith is not only believing when things are obvious, faith is continuing to trust when things are quiet, when progress feels invisible, and when answers seem delayed, because often the quietest seasons are the closest ones to change, and the strongest evidence that something powerful is approaching your life is the unusual sense that something is about to shift, even though you cannot yet explain how or when it will happen. And that feeling inside you right now is not imagination. It is confirmation that the blessing you prayed for is still on its way and closer than it has ever been before. And right now there is something happening in your life that you cannot fully explain, but deep inside your spirit you can feel it shifting, because the same doors that once stayed closed without reason are beginning to loosen. The same confusion that once kept you awake at night is slowly being replaced with quiet clarity. And the same heaviness that followed you through seasons of disappointment is starting to lift in a way that proves God was never ignoring you. He was positioning you. Because what you thought was delay was actually protection. What you thought was silence was actually preparation. And what you thought was rejection was actually redirection toward the blessing that has your name written on it before you were even born. And this is why the pressure you felt recently became so intense. Because breakthroughs are always preceded by moments that feel uncertain, uncomfortable, and overwhelming. But those moments are not meant to destroy your faith, they are meant to strengthen your endurance so that when the answer finally arrives, you are strong enough to carry what you once only prayed for. And this is the part many people never understand, because they expect blessings to arrive quietly and easily. Yet God often prepares miracles through movement you cannot see, and connections you cannot predict, and protection you did not even realize you needed. Which means while you were worrying about what was leaving your life, God was already arranging what was coming toward your life. While you were questioning why certain people stopped supporting you, God was removing voices that could not walk with you into your next level. And while you were wondering whether your prayers were being heard, heaven was already responding in ways that would change the direction of your future permanently. Because there are answers that cannot arrive until certain chapters close and certain distractions disappear and certain fears lose their power over your decisions. And the truth is, you are standing closer to that moment right now than you have ever been before, even if your situation still looks unfinished on the outside. Because God's greatest work often begins invisibly before it becomes undeniable. And the shift you are feeling inside your heart is not random emotion but confirmation that something you have waited for through tears, patience, and faith is finally moving toward manifestation. Which means this is not the season to give up or slow down or doubt what you have already believed for so long. This is the season to stay steady even when the path looks quiet, to stay faithful even when the results are not visible yet, and to stay confident even when others cannot understand what you are expecting, because the same God who carried you through confusion is now guiding you toward clarity. The same God who protected you during loss is now preparing you for restoration. And the same God who strengthened you when nobody else noticed is now positioning you for a moment that will make everything you endured suddenly make sense. And when that moment arrives, you will realize that nothing you survived was wasted, nothing you prayed was ignored, and nothing you hoped for was forgotten, because heaven never forgets faith that refuses to quit even when the journey feels longer than expected. And the reason you are still here watching this message today is because your story is not ending in struggle but transitioning into purpose, not closing in disappointment but opening in direction, and not stopping in uncertainty but moving forward into the exact breakthrough God planned for you long before you ever asked for it. Before this message ends today, there is something your spirit needs to recognize right now, because what you thought was a delay was never a denial, and what you believed was silence was actually preparation happening in places you could not see yet. And the reason this moment feels different from all the previous moments of waiting is because something has already shifted behind the scenes in your favor, even though your eyes have not caught up with the evidence yet. And that strange calm you felt recently, even in the middle of uncertainty, was not random, but a quiet signal that the season you prayed through with tears is slowly turning into the season you will walk through with confidence. Because when God begins moving the final pieces into place, He often lets your heart feel peace before your situation shows change, so that when the breakthrough arrives, you recognize it was never luck but alignment that carried you forward. Sparkles, there were nights you almost gave up, not because you were weak but because you were tired of believing for something that seemed to move further away every time you reached toward it. And yet, even during those moments, when your faith felt smaller than your fear, something inside you still refused to quit completely. And that stubborn hope inside you was not something you created on your own, but something placed inside you intentionally so you would survive the waiting season long enough to reach this turning point where the pressure you endured begins transforming into purpose you can finally step into. Because the truth is, the blessing you asked for has been traveling towards you longer than you realize, and the reason it took time was because it had to grow strong enough to support the future you are about to enter. You thought the closed doors meant the opportunity disappeared, but what really happened was the wrong doors closed so the right one would not be hidden behind distraction anymore. And now you are standing closer to the doorway that actually belongs to your future, even though it still feels unfamiliar. And sometimes unfamiliar places feel uncomfortable, not because they are wrong, but because they are new territory meant for a stronger version of you that is just now beginning to rise inside your life fire. There were people who misunderstood your silence, and assumed you stopped trying, but what they never saw was the quiet rebuilding happening inside your heart, while you were learning lessons that could not be taught quickly, because growth that lasts always happens slowly enough to change who you are before it changes what surrounds you. And that is exactly why what is coming next will not disappear as quickly as the things you lost before, because this time the foundation beneath your future is stronger than the storms that once shook your confidence. Something powerful happens when a person continues walking forward even while they feel uncertain, and that quiet persistence you carried through disappointment has already opened pathways ahead of you that did not exist when this journey first started. And what makes this moment different is that the answers you were searching for outside yourself are beginning to appear through circumstances instead of confusion, which means movement has already started even if the final result has not fully revealed itself yet. Sunrise, the reason this message found you today is because you needed confirmation that what you sensed recently was real and not imagination, because there was a moment when you felt something inside shift, and you could not explain it to anyone around you, yet you knew something was different. And that feeling was the beginning of transition happening inside your story before transition becomes visible around your story. And when internal change begins before external change appears, it always means the timeline you were waiting on has already started moving forward. There were seasons when you questioned whether your prayers were heard at all, but what you never realized was how many unseen protections were already placed around your path during those same seasons when you felt alone. Because sometimes the greatest blessings are not the opportunities that arrive, but the problems that quietly disappear before they reach you. And there were situations that never touched your life because they were removed before they could interrupt your purpose, even though you never knew they existed. Right now, something is rearranging itself in your favor, and even though the process feels slow, it is precise. And precision always matters more than speed when the future being prepared for you is meant to last longer than the struggles that came before it. Because quick success often fades quickly, but prepared success becomes permanent when it finally arrives. Folded hands. There were moments you compared your timeline to other people and wondered why their progress seemed faster than yours, but what you did not see was how different your destination actually is. Because comparison always hides purpose by making you believe you are behind when in reality you are being guided along a completely different road that leads somewhere they were never meant to go. And that is why your journey required patience instead of shortcuts, so that when you finally arrive where you belong, you will recognize it immediately without confusion. Something else is happening right now that you may not have noticed yet, and it is the quiet removal of distractions that once consumed your attention but never supported your future. And as those distractions continue disappearing, you will begin noticing clarity replacing confusion and direction replacing doubt, because your energy is no longer being pulled toward places that were never designed to hold your destiny. The strength you built during the hardest parts of this season is about to become visible in ways that surprise even you, because there were abilities growing inside you while you thought nothing was changing at all, and those abilities are about to open opportunities that would not have recognized the version of you that existed before this transformation started. Which means the waiting season was never empty time but preparation time, shaping the person who could finally carry what is coming next. There is a reason you kept seeing small signs of encouragement recently, even when larger answers seemed delayed, and that reason is because confirmation always arrives before completion, so your heart stays ready for what your life is about to receive. And those small signs were reminders that movement already started long before results appeared clearly in front of you. Even now, something is aligning quietly in your favor, and when it finally becomes visible, you will realize how every delay protected you from something that would have slowed your progress instead of supporting it. And suddenly, the frustration you carried earlier will begin making sense in a way that replaces disappointment with gratitude, because clarity always changes how the past looks once the future begins opening. You are closer than you think, not because circumstances suddenly changed overnight, but because your perspective has already started shifting in a direction that allows you to recognize opportunity when it appears instead of overlooking it like before. And sometimes the greatest transformation happens not when life changes around you, but when your ability to see possibility changes within you. There is momentum building right now, even if it still feels quiet, and that momentum is carrying you toward the moment you once imagined but almost stopped believing would happen. And when it finally arrives, you will understand why the process required patience instead of speed, because what is coming next is not temporary relief but lasting movement into the life you were preparing for longer than you realized. And the most important truth you need to remember today is that the blessing you prayed for did not disappear during the waiting season. It was growing stronger while you were growing stronger, so that when both finally meet at the right moment, your story will change in a way that proves every silent prayer you whispered was heard long before you saw the answer begin to appear. What if I told you that the silence you thought meant nothing was actually the loudest confirmation that something extraordinary is already moving toward you right now? That the delay you cried over was never a denial but a divine rearrangement happening behind doors you could not see? Because this is the moment where everything begins to make sense, even if your circumstances still look confusing and even if your heart still feels tired from waiting. And the reason you are still here listening to this message is not random at all, because there is a shift happening in your life that cannot be stopped anymore, and the blessing you almost gave up believing in is closer than it has ever been before. Closer than yesterday, closer than last week, closer than every moment you spent wondering if your prayers were heard. And what you need to understand right now is that God does not allow a season of testing to last forever. He allows it only long enough to prepare you for something that requires a stronger version of you than the one who first started praying. Because the truth is, you were never meant to walk into your next chapter carrying the same fears, the same doubts, and the same limitations that tried to define you before. And that is why things slowed down. That is why certain doors closed. That is why some people disappeared without explanation. Because what is coming next in your life cannot be handled by the version of you that existed at the beginning of your struggle. It can only be carried by the person you are becoming right now. And even though the transformation has been uncomfortable and sometimes lonely and sometimes confusing, it has never been meaningless. Every tear you cried was watering something you could not yet see. Every night you stayed strong when nobody noticed was strengthening something inside you that heaven has already recognized. And the moment you stop measuring your progress by what is visible and start trusting what is being built within you is the moment everything begins to accelerate in ways you never expected. Because there is a difference between waiting and being positioned. And you are not just waiting anymore, you are being positioned. Positioned for clarity where there was confusion. Positioned for stability where there was uncertainty. Positioned for restoration where there was disappointment. And positioned for opportunity where there once seemed to be nothing but closed paths. And right now, even If you cannot see the full picture yet, you can feel something changing inside your spirit, a quiet confidence replacing your fear, a strange peace replacing your anxiety, a sense that something is about to happen even if you cannot explain how or when it will arrive. And that feeling is not imagination, it is confirmation. Confirmation that the season you prayed through is finally turning into the season you will walk through with gratitude instead of questions, with strength instead of exhaustion, with purpose instead of confusion. Because God never brings you this far just to leave your story unfinished, and He never prepares a breakthrough without first preparing the person who will receive it. And that means the growth you went through was not wasted time, it was necessary time. Necessary for your heart to become steady enough to hold what is coming. Necessary for your faith to become strong enough to protect what is coming. Necessary for your vision to become clear enough to recognize what is coming. When it finally appears in front of you, and there are moments very close ahead where you will look back at everything you worried about and realize it was all part of a bigger plan that you simply could not see yet. Because sometimes the greatest protection in your life does not look like progress at first, it looks like delay. And sometimes the greatest blessing does not arrive quickly, it arrives precisely when your life is strong enough to receive it without losing it. And the reason this message is reaching you right now is because you are stepping into a moment where your persistence is about to meet your reward, where your faith is about to meet your evidence, where your patience is about to meet your answer. And even if your environment still looks ordinary, your future is already shifting in extraordinary ways that cannot be reversed anymore. And what you need to do now is refuse to go back into doubt just because the results have not fully appeared yet. Refuse to return to fear just because the timeline has not matched your expectations yet. Refuse to believe the lie that nothing is happening when in reality everything is aligning exactly the way it needs to align for the next chapter of your life to open at the perfect time. Because the blessing that is coming toward you is not small, and it is not temporary, and it is not accidental, it is intentional and prepared and protected. And that is why the process took longer than you expected, because what is lasting always takes preparation, and what is meaningful always requires transformation. And the moment you understand that your waiting season was actually your strengthening season is the moment your perspective changes from frustration to anticipation. Because you are no longer the same person who started this journey, you are wiser now, calmer now, stronger now, and more aware now that something greater than coincidence has been guiding your steps all along. And the truth is, there were moments you almost gave up, but somehow you kept moving forward anyway. Somehow you kept believing even when nothing made sense. Somehow you kept trusting even when the silence felt heavy. And that persistence is exactly why you are now standing at the edge of something new that cannot be delayed much longer. Because blessings that are prepared with intention always arrive with precision. And what is meant for your life cannot be stolen by someone else, cannot be delayed forever, cannot be erased by temporary obstacles. It can only be positioned until the exact moment arrives when everything connects the way it was always meant to connect. And that moment is closer than you realize right now, closer than your doubts are telling you, closer than your circumstances are showing you. And as you continue moving forward with quiet faith instead of fear, you will begin to notice signs of alignment appearing in places where there used to be confusion. Opportunities appearing where there used to be limitations, and peace appearing where there used to be anxiety. Because what God is preparing for you is not just a change in circumstances, it is a change in direction, a change in identity, a change in the way you see your future and your purpose and your value. And when that realization fully reaches your heart, you will finally understand why the waiting was necessary, and why the silence was meaningful, and why the process could not be rushed. Because everything that is happening right now is leading you directly into the answer you have been praying for longer than you realize and closer than you think. Folded hands sparkles fire. And if you can hold your faith just a little longer, if you can keep trusting just a little deeper, if you can keep believing just a little stronger, then very soon you will look back at this exact moment and realize it was not the end of your patience, it was the beginning of your breakthrough. There is something happening right now in your life that you cannot fully see yet, something quiet but powerful, something invisible but unstoppable, something that is slowly arranging people, timing, opportunities, strength, clarity, and unexpected favor in ways you could never have organized on your own. And even though some days still feel confusing, and some nights still feel heavy, and some prayers still feel unanswered, what you don't realize is that this season was never meant to break you, but to prepare you, because the version of you that is about to step into what you prayed for cannot be the same version that once doubted their worth, once tolerated less than they deserved, once stayed silent when they should have spoken with courage, once stayed small when they were created to rise. And that is why things felt delayed. That is why certain doors closed without explanation. That is why certain people slowly disappeared without warning. And that is why your past sometimes looked empty when you expected it to be crowded. Because what felt like loss was actually protection, and what felt like silence was actually alignment, and what felt like waiting was actually transformation happening beneath the surface where only faith could see it. Folded hands, you were never forgotten in this process, not even for a moment. Because even when nothing around you seemed to move forward, there were unseen shifts taking place inside your character, inside your patience, inside your resilience, and inside your understanding of who you truly are. And those changes were more important than the changes you were asking for on the outside, because external blessings can only stay in your life when your internal strength is ready to carry them without fear, without insecurity, and without hesitation. And that is exactly why this timing feels different now, why your heart feels more steady now, why your thoughts feel clearer now, and why your spirit feels stronger now, even if your circumstances haven't completely changed yet, because the preparation stage is almost complete. And what is coming next is not random but intentional, and not temporary but lasting. Sunrise, there were moments when you questioned whether your effort mattered, whether your prayers were heard, whether your patience was worth it, whether your quiet endurance meant anything at all. But what you could not see during those moments was that every step you kept taking, even when you were tired, every decision you made to stay hopeful even when it would have been easier to give up, every time you chose faith instead of fear even when doubt was louder than confidence, those choices were building a foundation strong enough to support the life you once thought was too far away to reach. And now that foundation is ready to hold something bigger than what you originally imagined, something more stable than what you originally asked for, and something more meaningful than what you originally expected. Sparkles, you are closer than you think to a shift that will make the waiting make sense, closer than you think to clarity that will explain why certain chapters had to end the way they did, closer than you think to peace that will replace the anxiety that followed you through earlier seasons, and closer than you think to meeting the version of yourself that once felt impossible to become but is now quietly emerging through everything you survived, everything you learned, and everything you refused to let define you in a negative way. Because growth like this never happens loudly and transformation like this never happens instantly, but when it finally becomes visible, it changes everything at once in a way that feels both surprising and perfectly timed at the same moment. There is a reason your strength increased even when your situation didn't change immediately. There is a reason your perspective matured even when your opportunities seemed delayed. And there is a reason your confidence returned even when the path ahead still looked uncertain, because you were being positioned rather than paused, prepared rather than prevented, redirected rather than rejected, and protected rather than punished. And once you truly understand that difference, you begin to see your story differently, you begin to see your waiting differently, and you begin to see your future differently. Not as something fragile that could disappear, but as something solid that is finally ready to arrive in the right way at the right moment. Dizzy. So if today still feels like a quiet chapter instead of a breakthrough chapter, don't mistake the silence for absence, and don't mistake the delay for denial, because the blessing you prayed for did not disappear and the promise you held onto did not lose its direction. It simply moved into position at the exact pace required to meet the stronger, wiser, braver version of you that exists now. And when the moment finally arrives, you will not just receive what you once hoped for, but you will recognize why it had to arrive exactly now and not earlier, exactly this way and not differently, because everything that felt slow was actually precise and everything that felt uncertain was actually guided. And the story that once looked unfinished is quietly becoming complete in a way that will remind you that nothing you endured was wasted, and nothing you believed in was ever ignored, and nothing you carried with faith was ever forgotten.